Pause for a moment, my friend, and truly consider. What if the most profound ambition you've ever harbored was not truly yours? What if, from the very first breath of your career, the finish line you were told to race towards, the one marked security and retirement, was actually a mirage designed to keep you running in place, arriving at 65, perhaps with a gold watch, but an empty feeling where your true legacy should have been? This isn't about blaming anyone, but about gently peeling back the veil on a silent, almost invisible deception that has held generations captive. You see, there's something profoundly tragic happening all around us, every single day, in every city and town across this nation, across the world. People wake up before dawn. They put on their work clothes, they kiss their families goodbye, they pour their energy, their time, their very life force into their work day after day, year after year, decade after decade. They do this with dedication, with honor, with a deep belief that if they just keep going, if they just keep their heads down and work hard, everything will turn out all right in the end. They believe in the promise of security, the promise of a comfortable retirement, the promise that all this sacrifice will mean something, will lead somewhere good, somewhere safe, somewhere worthy of all those hours, all those days, all those years. But here's what nobody wants to talk about. Here's the truth that gets whispered in quiet moments, but never spoken aloud in the bright light of day. Most of these good people, these honest, hard-working, dedicated souls, arrive at the age of 65 and discover something that shakes them to their very core. They discover they have nothing, not nothing in the absolute sense, perhaps. They might have some savings, a modest pension, social security if they're fortunate, but nothing compared to what they dreamed of. Nothing compared to what they sacrificed for. Nothing that justifies the 40, 50 years they gave away. And worse, far worse, they discover they've lost something infinitely more precious than money. They've lost their time. They've lost their vitality. They've lost their dreams. They've lost themselves somewhere along that long, winding road that was supposed to lead to security, but instead led to a quiet desperation, a gnawing sense of what might have been. I want you to really feel this with me for a moment. Imagine being 65 years old, standing at the edge of your working life, looking back across all those decades. You remember being 25, 30, full of energy, full of hope, full of dreams about what you would accomplish, who you would become, what your life would mean. And now, at 65, you're financially dependent, still worried about money, still concerned about making ends meet, still unable to do the things you promised yourself you would do when you had the time. But more than that, you realize that the time is already gone. The dreams you postponed, the adventures you delayed, the person you meant to become, the legacy you wanted to leave, all of it remains undone, unfulfilled, unrealized. And you wonder, with a pain that's almost physical, where did it all go? How did this happen? You worked so hard. You did everything you were supposed to do. You followed all the rules. You played the game exactly as it was explained to you. So why are you here, at the finish line, feeling so empty, so cheated, so lost? This isn't a rare occurrence, my friend. This isn't an exception. This is the rule. This is what happens to the overwhelming majority of people who trust the system, who believe the conventional wisdom, who think that simply showing up and working hard for 40 years will guarantee them a good life. The statistics are absolutely staggering and, frankly, heartbreaking. Less than 5% of all people who work diligently, sometimes heroically, from their early 20s until the traditional retirement age of 65, ever achieve true financial independence. Let me repeat that because it's so important, so shocking, that it bears repeating. Less than 5%. Not 5% achieve wealth, not 5% become rich. 5% achieve basic financial independence, which simply means having enough resources to live comfortably, without needing to work, without depending on others, without constant worry about money. 5%. That means 95 out of every 100 people who dedicate their entire adult lives to work end up still struggling, still dependent, still trapped in financial anxiety even in their retirement years. Why is this happening? That's the question that haunted Napoleon Hill for decades. That's the question that drove him to interview over 500 of the most successful people of his era, to study them, to understand what they knew that others didn't, what they did that others weren't doing. And what he discovered was both simple and profound. The vast majority of people fail not because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, not because they're unlucky, They fail because they're operating on a fundamentally flawed understanding of how success actually works. They've been given a map that leads nowhere, and they follow it faithfully, diligently, right into that dead end at 65. They've been told that if you get a good education, find a stable job, work hard, don't make waves, and save a little money, you'll be fine. You'll be secure. You'll have a good life. But that formula, that conventional wisdom, that well-worn path, it's a lie. Not an intentional, malicious lie, perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. A lie born of ignorance, of outdated thinking, of a system that was designed to benefit the few while keeping the many in place, productive and compliant. Let me paint you a picture, a metaphor that captures this tragedy perfectly. Imagine a seed, tiny and full of potential, containing, within itself, the complete blueprint for a magnificent oak tree. This seed dreams, if seeds can dream, of spreading its branches wide, of reaching toward the sky, of providing shade and shelter, of standing strong and tall for generations. This is its nature, its purpose, its destiny coded into its very essence. But instead of being planted in rich, fertile soil, in a place where it can send down deep roots and reach up toward the sun, this seed is placed in a polished ceramic pot. It's a beautiful pot, carefully chosen, decorative, sitting on a windowsill where it receives just enough light to survive, just enough water to keep from dying. It even begins to grow, to sprout, to put out tiny leaves. To an outside observer, it looks like it's thriving, it's alive, it's green, it's growing. But it never becomes what it was meant to be. It never breaks free. It never sends down those deep roots into the earth. It never stretches toward the sky with powerful branches. It remains, year after year, a seedling in a pot, carefully maintained, meticulously watered, perpetually stunted. And at some point, perhaps after many years, the pot begins to crack. The small amount of soil becomes depleted. The roots, having nowhere to go, become tangled and bound. And that seed, now an old, exhausted seedling, realizes with profound sadness that it will never be the oak tree it was destined to become. This, my friend, is what happens to millions of lives. People are placed from a very young age into these invisible pots called conventional career paths, traditional employment, safe choices. They're given just enough education to be useful, just enough salary to keep showing up, just enough hope to keep them striving, but never enough freedom, never enough resources, never enough time or space to truly become what they were meant to be. They grow, yes, they develop skills, they gain experience, they even achieve small milestones, but they never flourish. They never break free. They never realize their full, magnificent potential. And at 65, they're still in that pot, and the pot is cracked, and they're exhausted, and they look around and wonder why they feel so unfulfilled, why they have so little to show for all their years of growth, all their years of effort. There was a time, early in my own journey, when the shadow of this very outcome felt palpable to me. I wasn't born knowing these truths. I had to discover them, often through painful experience and observation. I remember seeing men, good men, honest men, men who had given their best years, their vibrant energy, their loyal service to their employers, to their industries, to their careers. And I saw them in their later years, and what I saw in their eyes shook me. I saw regret. I saw confusion. I saw a deep, gnawing sense of having been somehow cheated, though they couldn't quite articulate how or by whom. They had done everything right according to the script they were given, and yet the ending was all wrong. They were supposed to be riding off into the sunset, enjoying the fruits of their labor, living out their golden years in peace and prosperity. Instead, they were worried about their health insurance, about their dwindling savings, about whether they would burden their children. They were filled with what-ifs. What if I had taken that risk? What if I had started that business? What if I had pursued that passion? What if I hadn't been so afraid, so cautious, so obedient to a system that never truly had my best interests at heart? This isn't about statistics, though the numbers are damning. This is about the very real, very human fear that touches us all at some point, usually in those quiet moments late at night or early in the morning, before the noise of the day drowns out our inner voice. It's the fear of looking back and realizing that the most precious currency of all time, that irreplaceable, irretrievable gift, was spent building a monument to someone else's dream, while leaving our own unwritten, unlived, unrealized. It's the fear of arriving at the end and discovering that we never really lived at all, that we were so busy surviving, so busy playing it safe, so busy following the rules, that we forgot to actually live, to create, to become, to matter. But here's what I want you to understand, and this is crucial. This is why we're having this conversation. It doesn't have to be your story. You are not destined to repeat this pattern. You are not trapped in this system unless you choose to remain trapped. There is another way. There has always been another way. It's just that nobody told you about it, or if they did, you were taught to dismiss it as unrealistic, as risky, as foolish. Perhaps you've felt that quiet unease I'm describing. Perhaps you've experienced that nagging suspicion that there's more to life, more to you, than the daily grind and the promise of a distant, often unsatisfying retirement. Perhaps you've looked at your current trajectory and done the math and realized with a sinking feeling that if you continue on this path, you're going to end up exactly where you don't want to be. Perhaps you've wondered if there's something fundamentally wrong with you for wanting more, for feeling restless, for questioning the conventional wisdom that everyone around you seems to accept without question. Let me assure you of something right now. There is nothing wrong with you. That restlessness, that unease, that suspicion, that's not a problem. That's a signal. That's your inner wisdom, your true self, trying to get your attention, trying to tell you that you're capable of so much more, that you deserve so much more, that there's a better way if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to have the courage to step off that well-worn path that leads nowhere. This isn't just another video about financial planning, about budgeting, about saving more and spending less. Those things have their place, but they're not the answer to this problem. You cannot save your way to the life you truly want. You cannot budget your way into fulfilling your purpose. This is an invitation to something far deeper, far more transformative. This is an invitation to decode a fundamental misunderstanding about success itself, an understanding that has led countless good people, intelligent people, hard-working people, down a path of unfulfilled potential. We're going to unmask the illusion that hard work alone is the key. We've been taught that if you work hard enough, long enough, everything will work out. But that's simply not true. Hard work is necessary, absolutely, but it's not sufficient. There are millions of people working incredibly hard right now, multiple jobs, long hours, back-breaking labor, and they're barely surviving. Hard work without direction is like that ship we'll talk about in a moment. Powerful engines churning, going nowhere. What we're going to reveal here is the underlying principle that enables true freedom, the kind of freedom where your spirit soars, where your work becomes a joy rather than a burden, where abundance isn't something you struggle for, but something that flows naturally as a byproduct of who you've become and what you're contributing to the world. This isn't about working harder. Most people are already working too hard, exhausting themselves, sacrificing their health, their relationships, their peace of mind. This is about working smarter, yes, but more importantly, it's about working from a place of purpose and direction that most common advice completely overlooks. When you work with purpose, when you work toward a clearly defined aim that's truly yours, that resonates with your deepest values and aspirations, everything changes. The quality of your work changes. The energy you bring to it changes. The opportunities that present themselves change. The results you generate change. It's not magic, though it can feel magical. It's the application of profound principles that Napoleon Hill spent his lifetime uncovering. Principles that the most successful people throughout history have understood and applied, whether consciously or unconsciously. So how does one break free from this pattern? How do we stop being that seedling in a ceramic pot and start becoming the magnificent oak we were meant to be? How do we ensure that we don't spend 40 years working hard only to arrive at 65 with nothing but regrets and what-ifs? The answer lies not in doing more of what you're already doing, not in working longer hours or taking on extra shifts or finding another side hustle. The answer lies in understanding something fundamentally different about how the world of achievement truly operates, about how success actually unfolds, about what separates that 5% who thrive from the 95% who merely survive. Let's begin with a story, a simple fable that illustrates this truth with perfect clarity. Imagine a majestic ship, resplendent and strong, freshly built, sitting in the harbor ready to set sail. This ship has everything it needs. It has a powerful engine, capable of great speed, able to handle rough seas. It has a skilled crew, experienced sailors who know their craft, who are ready and willing to work hard. It has ample provisions, enough food and water and supplies for a long journey. It has been inspected, certified, deemed seaworthy. By every measure, this ship is prepared for success. And so, with great fanfare, with flags flying and horns sounding, the ship sets sail from port. The crew is excited, energized, ready for the adventure ahead. The engines roar to life, propelling the vessel forward through the water. Day after day, week after week, month after month, the ship continues. The crew works diligently. They maintain the engines, they repair what needs repairing, they navigate the waves, they battle storms, they work hard, incredibly hard, doing everything good sailors are supposed to do. They're not lazy, they're not incompetent, they're dedicated, professional, hard-working. But here's the tragic thing. Despite all this effort, despite all this work, despite all this dedication, the ship never reaches its intended destination. Years pass, and the ship is still at sea, still moving, still burning fuel, still wearing down its crew. Eventually, provisions run low, the crew becomes exhausted, disheartened. The engines begin to fail. And one day, the ship drifts back near the same port from which it departed, or simply breaks down somewhere in the middle of the ocean, battered, worn, having achieved nothing of lasting consequence, having reached no destination, having fulfilled no purpose. The crew looks at each other in confusion and dismay. We worked so hard, they say. We did everything right. We battled every storm. We maintained the ship. We never gave up. So why are we here? Why did we accomplish nothing? Why do we feel so empty, so lost, so defeated? The answer is painfully simple. The ship had no rudder, or rather it had no captain with a clear destination, no one at the helm with a definite purpose, no guidance system directing all that power and effort toward a specific aim. The engines were powerful, but they had no direction. The crew was skilled, but they had no goal. All that energy, all that potential, all that work was simply expended without any real purpose, at the mercy of currents and winds, drifting aimlessly through the vast ocean. The ship wasn't broken. The crew wasn't incompetent. The problem was the absence of a definite, clearly defined destination that could guide every decision, every action, every expenditure of energy. Without that, all the power in the world is wasted. All the skill in the world leads nowhere. All the hard work in the world produces nothing of value. My friend, this is the situation of so many lives. Lives that are full of energy, full of intelligence, full of good intentions, full of hard work, but lacking a definitive course. People wake up every day and work hard just like that crew, but they're not working toward anything specific. They're not building toward a clear vision of their own choosing. They're just working, just surviving, just getting through the day, the week, the year. They're at the mercy of their circumstances, their employer's needs, the economy, random events. They have no rudder, no clear purpose guiding them. And so, despite all their effort, despite their good intentions, despite their dedication, they drift. They work until they're exhausted, until the fuel runs out, until they reach 65, only to discover that they're still in the same place, or worse, that they've made no real progress toward anything that truly matters to them. They have nothing to show for it, because there was no it to show. There was no destination reached because there was no destination chosen. The feeling of being adrift, of working hard but getting nowhere meaningful, is one of the most soul-crushing experiences a human being can have. It's a slow death of the spirit. It's waking up every day with a vague sense of dread, of pointlessness, of going through motions without meaning. It's looking at your calendar and seeing it filled with obligations that don't excite you, that don't fulfill you, that don't connect to any larger purpose. It's the Sunday evening anxiety, the Monday morning dread, the counting down of hours until the weekend, the counting down of years until retirement, all while life, precious, irreplaceable life, slips away moment by moment. This is the silent epidemic, the unspoken crisis that millions face but few acknowledge. We medicate it with distractions, with entertainment, with consumption, with anything that can numb the pain of purposelessness. But the pain remains, just beneath the surface, that gnawing question, is this all there is? Let me share another illustration, another way of seeing this truth. I once observed two men on a construction site. This was years ago, but the image has stayed with me because it so perfectly captured a fundamental distinction that most people never grasp. One man was a laborer, a bricklayer. He was a good man, a hard worker. I watched him as he toiled tirelessly under the hot sun, laying brick after brick, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, sweat dripping from his brow. He was completely focused on the task at hand, on getting each brick perfectly level, on applying the mortar correctly, on completing his section of wall. He took pride in his work. You could see it in the care he took with each brick. He was doing good, honest work, the kind of work that builds nations, the kind of work that deserves respect. And at the end of the day, he had a wall to show for it, a tangible result of his labor. He was earning his wage, supporting his family, doing what he was employed to do. The other man was an architect. He walked among the rising structure with a completely different bearing, a different energy. He carried a rolled set of blueprints under his arm, a pencil behind his ear. He would stop and look, really look, at the structure taking shape. He would sketch, make notes, contemplate. He never touched a single brick, he never mixed mortar. He never broke a sweat from physical labor. To someone who didn't understand, he might have appeared to be doing nothing, or at least nothing as real and tangible as what the laborer was doing. But this man wasn't looking at bricks and mortar, he was seeing something entirely different. He was seeing the entire cathedral in his mind's eye, the complete vision of what this structure would become when it was finished. He was seeing the soaring arches, the beautiful windows, the space where people would gather for generations to come. He was seeing a legacy, a work of art, a contribution to the world that would outlast him by centuries. Both men worked. I want to be very clear about that. Both contributed, both were necessary. But there was a fundamental difference in what they were building. The laborer was building a wall. That's what his work consisted of, that's what he focused on, that's what he would be paid for. One brick, then another, until the wall was complete, and then he would move on to the next wall, and then the next, throughout his career. At 65, that laborer might have laid hundreds of thousands of bricks. He might have strong arms, a wealth of experience, a small pension, the respect of his peers. All of that is honorable and good. But what would he have built that was truly his own? What legacy would he leave? He was always building someone else's vision, someone else's dream. His skill, his time, his energy, his life force was poured into creating what others had designed. The architect, on the other hand, was building a legacy. He was creating something that bore his name, that reflected his vision, that embodied his unique gift. When that cathedral stood complete, people wouldn't remember the individual laborers who laid each brick, but they would remember the architect. They would speak his name. They would marvel at his creation. And more importantly, the architect himself would look at that structure with a sense of profound fulfillment, knowing that he had brought something into the world that didn't exist before, something born from his imagination, his knowledge, his creative spirit. At 65, the architect doesn't just have a pension, he has a portfolio, he has a reputation. He has wealth, yes, but also meaning, purpose, a sense of having truly lived, having truly contributed, having truly mattered. Now, I'm not saying everyone should be an architect or that physical labor is less valuable. That's not the point at all. The point is this. One man was working to complete tasks assigned by others, trading his time and energy for wages, building pieces of someone else's dream. The other was working to fulfill a vision that was his own, creating something of lasting value, building his own dream into reality. One was a participant in someone else's plan, the other was the author of his own destiny. One was working for a living, the other was living his work. And that distinction, that fundamental difference in approach and mindset, determines everything about what you end up with at the end of your working life. The frustration of feeling like a cog in a machine, of being replaceable, of knowing that if you disappeared tomorrow, someone else would simply step into your role and the machine would continue without missing a beat, that's soul-crushing. The yearning for one's work to matter, to leave something enduring, to be more than just a function, more than just a task completer, that's a deep human need. We want to create, we want to build, we want to leave the world different, better, marked by our presence, but most employment structures don't allow for that. They need interchangeable parts, not unique creators. They need people who will follow instructions, not people who will question and innovate and build their own visions. And so, good people, talented people, People with so much potential spend their entire lives being that laborer, laying bricks for someone else's cathedral, arriving at 65 with strong arms perhaps, but an empty place where their own creation should have been. They built nothing of their own, just small fractions of countless other people's dreams. And at the end, they wonder why it feels like they have nothing, even though they worked so hard. It's because the nothing isn't about money or possessions. It's about meaning, legacy, self-expression, fulfilled potential. It's about never having built their own cathedral. These stories illustrate a crucial point, one that we cannot afford to overlook if we're going to break free from this pattern. It's not just effort that defines our destination, not just hard work, not just showing up day after day. Those things matter, certainly, but they're not sufficient. What truly defines our destination, what determines whether we arrive at 65 with abundance and fulfillment or with nothing but regrets, is something far more potent, far more fundamental. So, what precisely is this missing piece? What are the profound yet often overlooked principles that transform effort into lasting achievement, that turn a drifting ship into one that reaches magnificent destinations, that elevate a bricklayer into an architect of their own life? The answer begins with what Napoleon Hill called the definite chief aim. This is the cornerstone, the foundation, the absolutely non-negotiable starting point for any life of genuine achievement and fulfillment. And yet, it's the one thing that most people never develop. They have wishes, they have fantasies, they have vague desires. They say things like, I want to be successful, or I want to be happy, or I want to be financially secure, or I want to make a difference. These are not aims. These are not purposes. These are fuzzy, general, undefined wishes that have no power to direct your life, no capacity to focus your energy, no ability to guide your decisions. Hill taught us, and this cannot be emphasized enough, that your aim must be singular, specific, crystal clear, written down in precise detail, and imbued with a burning intensity that makes it the central organizing principle of your entire existence. Let me explain what this really means, because this is where most people go wrong. They think having a goal is enough. They think saying, I want to be a millionaire, or I want to own my own business, or I want to retire early, constitutes a definite aim. It doesn't. A definite chief aim must be so specific that you can see it, taste it, feel it as if it already exists. It must answer the questions, what exactly do I want? Why do I want it?